Yeah,
I am
fun.
Marc Malkin. I'm a senior editor at Variety, and I'm here with some of the writers from The Tonight Show. And we have head writer Rebecca Drysdale, and then we have writer and producer Gerard Bradford, and then writer and producer Jeremy Bronson. So is everyone hearing me out there in the world, I think? This is always such a strange thing for me. Okay, good. Everyone's nodding. So let's start off first. How is everyone doing in quarantine?
Good. Taking it day by day, hour by hour, second by second.
Yes, I started this job in quarantine, so it's been an interesting experience for sure.
Yes, Becky started. We were already doing the at-home shows when Becky started, so this is all she knows.
I don't know what anyone's legs look like. I don't know who I'm dealing with. So, but it's certainly made it interesting, and I don't know, it helps to be busy.
So let's start. Just give us a summary of each of your roles. If Jeremy wants to start first, tell everybody, what do you do?
Sure. Thank you guys all for coming. My name is Jeremy Bronson, producer, writer for all things creative on the show. I was the head monologue writer on Late Night with Jimmy Fallon, and then I was in LA working on sitcoms, and then I recently joined the show, The Tonight Show, about 6 months ago, maybe a little longer.
And Gerard?
Hello, everybody. I'm Gerard Bradford. I'm a writer and producer on the show, again, for all things creative. I've been with the show since the beginning of Late Night, so for close to 11 years. So at this point, I'm sort of a jack of all trades, and they can't get rid of me.
And Rebecca?
Yes, I am the editor, and again, I'm very new. I think a month tomorrow. So I think you know, the people who've done this job have done it in a lot of different ways. So I'm trying to figure out the way that I do it based on what I feel like I'm good at and what I feel like the show needs. I'm very much learning what those things are.
So let's talk about the Tonight Show writers' room. Gerard, tell me in 3 words, what's it like?
Writer's Zoom.
Yeah.
It's not a room anymore. It's interesting. It's you know, you definitely, it's like this, really. This is what it looks like, and it's just a bunch of writers on a Zoom, and it's challenging because you lose that energy that you get in a room with a bunch of people, and you're bouncing jokes off of each other, and you're getting that sort of instant gratification. But at the same time, you don't have to shower every day either, so it's kind of a wash.
We weren't big on that.
But you also
lack of a wash.
Yeah. You have to. It's tricky. Even just doing this, you can see like there's lags, there's timing. Some people are probably freezing. Like it's hard to even just tell a joke, and then sometimes you don't hear laughter, and it's because everybody's muted. Or at least that's what I tell myself.
Sometimes it's
Rebecca,
just
sometimes it's just
Rebecca, how is it? Rebecca, how has it been for you? Because you don't know what the Tonight Show writers' room is like.
Yeah, I mean, it's also, I mean, regardless of that, every writer's room is so different, and a writer's room for a show that happens that day on that day is completely different than a writer's room for a show that writes everything and then shoots everything later. So it's so completely different anyway, that the fact that it's all happening in little boxes on my computer is kind of not, it's as different as everything else about it is. I am trying to, I think I'm trying to kind of, as much as I can, create that vibe that Gerard's talking about, where even though we're, on Zoom, that there can still be a chance to like riff and bounce ideas off each other. And I'm getting to know the writer, so I need that opportunity also.
So
In normal
what's the most,
times, oh, sorry, I was just
Go
gonna
ahead.
say, in normal times, it is like a really like upbeat, fun vibe, and it's a combination of riffing things out as a group, whether it's putting up on the screen, you know, a bit that everyone's going to punch up and kind of riff off each other with, and then a lot of also individual work. So there's like good balance of kind of being around a table and going back to your office and looking at the blank page and trying to figure it out.
Gerard, tell me, what's it like to, have all these writers trying to write for one voice, for Jimmy's voice? How do you know when that's working? How do you know when there's a writer who's joined the room or the Zoom that has found his voice?
I mean, it's kind of interesting. I mean, from a writer's perspective, to be able to write for someone like Jimmy, who just has so many tools. He sings, he dances, he do sketches. He's got that SNL bone in his body still, so he can do a lot of different things, and he's a super quick learn about all of it too. So, I mean, as a writer, it's almost like a lot of different voices under the umbrella of one voice. There's a lot of room to write to him because he can do so much. So, in that way, it's kind of, a dream, because you can sort of make all your dreams come true if you want them to.
And Jeremy, how did you know that you were right for Jimmy, that it was working?
I think we had a similar sensibility 10 years ago, or however long it was, before the show even existed. I think we found the same types of jokes funny and being silly and weird and all that stuff. So it felt like a good fit. And then also, when you're around people for so many hours every day, your brains sort of meld and you're evolving together. And, we're spending a lot of time with Jimmy and we're riffing together and affect everyone's sensibilities. So some of it was feeling like a good fit going in, and then some of it just happens organically once you're there. I mean, I've seen writers on the show who had voices that I thought were very different than Jimmy's come and bring that sort of outside sensibility to the show and kill it and do great,
Rebecca, what are you hoping to bring to the show that's new?
Well, what's nice is, in the first couple of meetings that I had with the producers and with Jimmy also, it seems to be, and this was, I think, literally the day before the quarantine actually happened. I mean, like,
I think it
the
was,
day
yeah.
before. I think, yeah, Jimmy was the last hand I shook, I think. And I haven't watched it. I came in with Jeremy and Gerard and Gavin, the showrunner of the show, were very, sort of clear with me that like the show is changing and there's room to try new things, and that Jimmy's open to trying new things. And I think it was literally the next day that the show shut down, and that kind of created a situation where things had to change, and we had to change how we went about creating the show altogether. But I also think it forced some things to change in terms of the kind of material that's being done and the way the material is being done. So I'm aware that I'm coming in during an evolution of the show. And in terms of what you were saying about, Jimmy and his voice and taste, I'm learning that. I'm learning where my taste and my sensibility overlap with his, and also learning where he's willing and ready to branch out from the stuff that he's done in the past. And it seems like it's an interesting time in terms of the show, but also just like what is comedy's job in general right now, and how is Jimmy answering that question versus how some of the other late night shows are answering that question. So what's nice about it is that it's a very active conversation in the creation of the show. It's like something that is discussed. Like, what are we saying? What are we talking about? How are we talking about it? And that's you know, I like a lot of different things. You know, I wrote on Key and Peele for a long time. And then I wrote on All That. So I like the social commentary stuff, and I like the pie in the face stuff. And I think that both of those things can exist on the show.
Let's take a look. I think if whoever is in the the wizard here, to go to our first clip of Jimmy doing a little musical number.
I'm starting to crack, I'm starting to crack. Will I ever get my old life back? I don't need another snack, I'm just starting to crack. Can't figure out my daughter's math. Spent 3 hours taking a bath. Looked at the clock, it's 4 p.m. I'm on my 3rd glass of wine by then. Rearranged my living room. Called all my 3rd cousins on the Zoom. Laughed too hard that my background's a beach.
So take me to day one when how that came together.
That was, Jimmy had the idea for the song, just sort of the melody and the I'm starting to crack. And 2 of our writers, Dan Chamberlain and Rachel Winitsky, sort of basically wrote the song off of his little idea. And then we did it for the show. Jimmy decided, rather than just just playing the song to camera like he normally would, we would sort of try to make a quasi music video out of it, so you could see all those little insert shots. One of which, by the way, the shot of the 3 wine glasses with the wine, that was me. And that was like a last minute thing. We were watching it. I think this thing needs more scenes. So I just did that in the kitchen, and I drank all the wine too. That was real. And then there was another scene, I should mention this. There's another verse where Jimmy's starting to really crack. And at one point he puts on a t-shirt and wears it like pants and puts his legs through the sleeve holes. And I did that too. But Jeremy thought it looked inappropriate. So that didn't make the cut.
How do you decide what Jeremy, how do you decide what looks inappropriate?
This was a unique case. It was optically, it looked like maybe he wasn't wearing anything at all. It was so it was a unique case. I'm usually not the pill. Yeah, I'm usually pretty chill. Yeah.
And how many? I mean, how many drafts of the song do you go through until you get it right? Until you say, okay, this is what we're going with.
They're all different. Sometimes you nail it on the first try. Often you'll do a draft and then Jimmy will read it and he'll have some ideas and notes, and then you try it again. I think this one maybe went through like 3 passes before we got to the final cut.
But there's all of the songs on the show, actually many of the bits on the show evolve in very different ways. Sometimes it'll be, Jimmy had a line in his head and he'll email some of us this line, and then we'll take that and writers will figure it out from that notion. Other times it's Jimmy writing something. Other times it's the writers bringing in something that they just wrote late at night and was fully conceived and they want to present. It really does happen in every possible way.
And there's also,
and Rebecca,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, I was gonna say the show moves fast. If there's an idea that people are excited about, it's like, great, we're doing it today, and then it happens that day. It's there are some things that are like, especially things that are, topical to the day and aren't gonna work next Tuesday. It's like, all right, well, that has to happen today, so it just we just do it. And it's a massive machine, so it's a song, but it also requires graphics, and it also requires this video element, and then we need a guest, and it happens very fast. There's not a lot of time for things to kind of swim about and you know, luckily, you know, especially in this case, like you know, Dan and Rachel, who Gerard was talking about before, you know, they whip the stuff up really fast and they come in with a recorded version of it, and you know, it's everyone's really nice on this show. I mean, I'm new, but it feels like everyone's nice on this
very
show,
new.
which is nice. I know. I'll learn. We'll have another one next week. But I've, even in my limited time, like, you know, I've interacted with the talent department and the video department, the graphics department, and everybody's just kind of like trying to get the ball in the hoop. And it's nice. I'm a big sports person. Nope.
You love the sports.
I use a lot of sports metaphors. But yeah, some things have time to kind of marinate and some things just have to go.
Rebecca, since you are new and we've only had the at-home edition for a limited time, what's your favorite bit? What's your favorite thing that's happened?
Just
what is my favorite?
the one that I wrote.
Something by Jeremy.
Jeremy's bits are pretty much bulletproof. You know, it's interesting because I took these meetings before the quarantine and got the job a little bit after the quarantine started. So I'd seen some of the home shows before before Jeremy lost the coin toss and they hired me. And I was just really into the kind of like that it was Jimmy at home, and there was some relatability, and it was just like hanging out. And I think my favorite things on the show are the things that give that feel like that. We're just like hanging out with Jimmy in his house, because I feel like it makes the show sort of reachable while still creating some continuity with the normal world. It's exciting because it's for me anyway, it's been like, okay, like instead of what can't we do with our limitations, like, ooh, what can we do? What can we do with Zoom that we wouldn't even be able to do normally, for example? And that's been a cool, exciting place to play. I realize I'm answering around your question, and it's because I'm not coming up with an answer for myself.
Well, actually, what you just said there, Becky, is like a really good example, though. The like The Longest Days of Our Lives, which is the soap opera thing that we're doing.
Yes.
If we were doing it in the studio, you know, it would be a 3-wall set and a big thing, and wardrobe and props and hair and makeup. And the way we do it now, it's very lo-fi and kind of Wild West. And like Becky was saying, that's sort of writing into that has been kind of fun.
Yeah, and that's something I want to do a lot more of too. It's just like, let's lean into our limitations and, you know, get a little punk rock about it and see what we can make instead of worrying about what we can't make.
I mean, The Longest Days of Our Lives, I have to tell you, my husband and I were watching it yesterday on the couch, and literally we're doubled over laughing. It is so genius. So I'm going to ask the wizard out there to show us a clip from The Longest Days of Our Life.
A horrible time that feels like it might last forever. These are the longest days of our lives.
Vanessa, as always, you look like you're full of secrets.
Well, I'm definitely full of one big secret. One big secret. Baby. That's right, Winston. I'm pregnant. 6 hours pregnant.
What? How? Did you?
I got pregnant on Zoom, which means...
No. The baby might be mine.
Okay, so it's what I find genius about it. It's The Longest Days of Our Lives. It's so simple, but it's so genius. Tell me about, is there brainstorming that goes on? Are you saying like, hey, we want to do some kind of soap opera thing? How does that even begin?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the genesis of this particular bit, but it is that kind of thing. It starts from a kernel that's like, is there a
It
way
was
to do?
Rachel, right?
Yeah, it's
It was written by
Rachel.
Rachel's baby.
beyond
Yeah.
hilarious. And I think it's to what Becky said about leaning into the limitations. I think what's been fun now, I think what's working is we're not trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. That's the expression, right?
You're
I'm
good.
a writer. Yeah.
Yeah. Round peg in a square hole, I say.
Thank you. But like we're not trying to hide the fact that this is a stripped down, bare bones show with limited production. And can we actually use that and lean into it and make that part of the comedy? And I thought Rachel did that so well. Obviously, it's there's some more of that coming up, so it's exciting.
Tell me about the inspired casting. Obviously, people that Jimmy knows, but does that go into where you're like, okay, this is definitely Will, definitely, like when do you know that's the casting, I guess?
Well, in this case, I think I think the script preceded the casting, but that's not always the case. Sometimes it's Jimmy will tell us, "Hey, I was talking to this person, and they want to do a bit, and we'll try to develop a longest days of our lives for that person." But in this case, we got to cast it and got both of our first choices, which was pretty cool.
Rebecca, is there anything different about now that's just off limits that, we can't have fun with, we can't joke about?
I think that what's nice about this show, and one of the reasons I was attracted to, I'm not a late night person, but one of the reasons I was excited is that I think that what Jimmy does that, again, these other shows don't do, is provide levity and sort of, he's more of a joy spreader than a like, let's cut things up and cut things down and come at everything with a razor's edge. And for me, I think right now that there are a lot of people who are on that project, are on the like cutting satire project, and on the bad, and then there's even more people on the bad news project. And I think that what's really nice is that this show, we don't ignore the news of the day, but it's a little more playful and a little more joyful, and that's been really nice. I haven't, and I feel like there's a pretty acute awareness across the board and a sensitivity to like, that comes off a little mean. This is, fat shamey for no reason, or like, we don't need to tell that joke right now. There has yet to be moments of someone trying to like push through something negative or unnecessarily hard. Everyone seems to be, and that's not to say that the show's totally toothless or without edge. I just think that the mission seems more to be about being funny and being playful. And there's, with our the guests on the show, there's so many games, and there's just a sense of play. And there's a slide in Jimmy's house. This is it's part of who he is. And so that's been really nice. I think I'm pretty sensitive about certain things, but I also feel totally 100% safe and welcome, at least in this writer's room / all the rooms we're in, to say like, hey, this feels a little off. This feels a little, it just seems like everyone is definitely taking on the project of let's not, offend or go places we don't need to go. My feeling generally is like, it's not so much that there are topics that are off limits, so much as there are ways of handling them that are off limits. And there's just certain things that people just don't need right now, you know, which is more negativity and more fear and more anger and things like that. So it's nice to be a part of a show that seems to agree on that across the board.
Jeremy and Gerard, this is sort of a two-part question. One, what's the skit or ongoing skit game that you were surprised took off? And what's the one that you really wanted to take off and it just landed like a dud?
Oh gosh, Gerard, you have to go first.
I think mine are more in the dud category, to be honest.
Oh, tell them about bread dogs.
Yeah, this is a bread. I didn't think bread dogs would be a good idea, but this was very early and late night, and I had an idea for a game with two audience contestants where you'd basically have two giant loaves of bread in the studio, and they would have to basically race. They'd have to dig through the giant loaf of bread, and whoever came out the other side first would be the winner. And I called it Bread Dogs, and I thought one person liked it. No one else even understood it at all.
Did it
I have
actually
a lot
make it
more of
on
those if you
air?
want. I can do this all night.
Did it make it on air?
No, it didn't even make it out of the
It didn't make
pitch
it
room.
out of the pitch meeting, but you know.
Yeah.
See, that's a situation where I'd be like, what about those who don't have that kind of bread wealth?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I should have
Sorts of
known.
reasons to kill that bit is
Lots of insensitive bread bits.
Not only sociopolitical reasons.
Jeremy, do you have one that you remember that you really wanted to get through and it just didn't resonate?
You know, you're gonna have to come. What, you have one? You have one for me?
Something just popped in my head.
Go ahead,
You
go
go.
ahead.
You go.
Go
I
ahead.
don't want to talk about it. You go.
I honestly, I can't think of one off the top of my head that I had high hopes for that sort of crashed. I'm gonna think of it before this is over. I'm gonna come up with that bit.
I like the
I can
idea
tell you a
that
funny.
I like the idea that
I can tell you a
Gerard
very
is-
funny story of a bit that did not get on the air, but actually
great.
made it to rehearsal. It was called the name of the skit was called The Perfect Butthole, and it was basically a guy that went to get a prostate exam, and the doctors were astonished at what they saw, and they kept bringing other people in to look at it, and everybody was just shocked at how perfect it was. A UPS guy came in and looked at it. Anyway, the funny part of the story is the night it was going to air was the night that they were going to announce that Jimmy was getting the Tonight Show. And then someone in their wisdom on the rehearsal floor said, "Hey, I'm not sure we should be doing this tonight." And everybody's like, "Oh yeah, of course not. We're definitely not doing this." So it got cut. Thank God.
Wait, I just need to know about rehearsals, and I need to know about
Yeah.
is it Jimmy on like a medical table in that
Our head
position?
writer at the time, 80 Miles, was the patient. I think Sarah Silverman was in the sketch too.
Ugh, I missed out
Um,
on having my butthole.
She was one of the. She was the astonished nurse. And we also the sketch was supposed to end. I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent on this. The sketch was supposed to end with Gordon Lightfoot coming on because he was the musical guest that night, and he was supposed to come on strumming a guitar. We'd written a whole song about the Perfect Butthole that we asked him to sing, and I remember we sent a pitch out to his people by email, and the pitch just came back. It just said no. And I have that framed on my desk in my office. Anyway,
Jeremy, it looks like
Right.
you want to tell a story. Did you think of one?
No, I didn't think of it. I just
Try
look
to
like I
top
have
that,
ideas all
man.
the time, but I don't have it.
That's true. What bit, what segment, what game were you shocked how it's just taken off and just went viral?
Well, I came up with thank you notes back in the day.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't, I don't think any
do you remember what you called it when you pitched it, Jeremy?
thank you notes.
This is the perfect butthole, I think.
but you never know what's going to become a recurring bit or not. There's plenty of things that you try as a one-off and you say, you know what, we can actually do another funny rendition of this week. And then before you know it, it's just becomes a staple of the show. And then there are actually other times with thank you notes. I think we actually went into a pitch meeting. Gerard, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we went into a pitch meeting for that one, actually trying to come up with a bit that would be recurring, which I remember at the time thinking, I don't know if this exercise would work. I don't know if you can will something to be a recurring bit, a top 10 list or something, but it worked.
And now, I didn't think lip sync that would be good. Shows what I know.
How often do you have guests who say, I want to be a part of this?
All the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
That happens.
What's the one that they all want to be a part of?
Well, you know what it is a lot? I think there's they'll see a bit and say, I want to do something like that. And we're getting that, for example, with Longest Days of Our Lives. There's a lot of talent that's reaching out and saying I'd love to do something like that, and then, we'll try to come up with something that's in that vein.
Rebecca, have you been thinking about that first skit when you're not at home anymore and you're back in the studio?
I mean, I'm just very aware that I'm gonna have to learn how to do this job all over again when that happens. I think it'll be very surreal and weird. I mean, the whole thing's gonna be surreal and weird anyway. Yeah, I think there's just gonna be starting kind of at the bottom of a totally new learning curve. There's also, I don't know, it's a scary time. It is an exciting time to be a part of this show because I, since pre-quarantine, but since, 2016-ish, have just been really thinking a lot about what is my job as a comedy writer right now? And things just kept getting worse from there. And so, I'm excited to be a part of the world opening back up and a part of saying something about it. It's cool to be a part of a show that's on every day, and it's an interesting way to reach an audience. Yeah, I'm excited, and it's such a hard thing to even think about because it's I'm also excited to walk down the street and get a bagel. I can't. I feel like the sketches for a year are just going to be about going outside again. It's going to be interesting, and I think I know there will be various phases of kind of going back to the studio. It's not going to be all this big overnight everything returns to normal. So I think it's going to have to keep evolving and changing through all of those different phases of kind of returning to whatever version of normal ever returns.
How do you I guess you obviously don't have a live audience, so you get that feedback from the live audience. What's working, what's landing like a dud. So how do you compensate for that now that you don't have that?
I mean, part of it, that's been something to figure out. It's actually been a kind of a fun challenge. Jimmy has Nancy, his wife, who is, literally the camera person on the show. So occasionally she will be the audience and you'll hear her chuckle, or he'll rope his kids into, various bits. It is functioning a little bit like an audience. But by the same token, I think one neat thing that's come out of this is for example, when Jimmy does the monologue, since he doesn't have that immediate response to play off of, you will see him tell a joke and then just kind of muse on it to himself for a minute, kind of be the guy reacting to it as well, play joke teller and audience at the same time, which I think ends up being a cool pretty cool effect. I mean, I think in general, these past, what is it, a couple months now? How long have we been in quarantine? A couple months, right?
2 months.
It reminds
73
me of,
days.
yeah, it reminds me of early late night, which was so exciting because you're like inventing it from scratch and like doing a lot of trial and error. You know, this worked, let's lean into that. This was a little trickier, let's stay away from that. So we've had that sort of kind of early days process again, and it's fun.
Let's talk about the writing of the monologue. When do the ideas start? Is it like the night before because something's happened on the news, or do you not even bother because it's going to change so much within a couple of hours? When does that, is it a text chain? Is it a WhatsApp? Like, where does this all start formulating?
I can speak to that for it's
Yeah.
actually it's a real process. It's much more formal than that. The writers get premises sent out to them the night before, and we have a designated monologue writing side of the writing staff. And they get a list of setups, basically the first line of the setup punchline, the setup. And then you try to come up with as many jokes as you can on it and then move on to the next one. And a lot of the writers will write some of those the night before, then wake up, new premises are sent to them for the morning and sort of throughout the day. So yeah, there's definitely stuff that's written the night before or early in the day that is just obsolete by the time we're taping it, so we cut it. But for those guys, it is sort of churning out jokes kind of from the end of the previous show to the beginning of the next one. Does that seem, do you guys agree?
Yeah.
What do you watch? Is there anything at night that you're watching for inspiration? I mean, obviously we know there's a lot of jokes that can be made about the news cycle, but is there, what are you watching? What are you listening to? What gets your creative juices flowing? Rebecca.
Yeah, I'm watching Ozark and the new Killing Eve. It's weird,
That's dark.
No, I mean, it's what I watch and what I make are very, very different. And part of it is that when you're watching comedy, first of all, at a certain point, you kind of you're like watching the dripping green matrix of it and not just enjoying it.
Right.
So especially right now, to dumb down my escape hatches are not watch other comedy, because it's always I didn't know Mike got this job, or oh, Rachel wrote this episode.
Mike's not even that good. Yeah.
Ugh, it's so overrated. But you're kind of it's kind of like you're at work. So for me anyway, I watch comedy that is. I love comedy, obviously, but the TV I watch is much more story based and drama based, and just kind of I guess in quarantine, especially just mental health wise, it's just things that I can just dumb down to and really turn my brain off. But there's not that much time. This job goes from when the show airs, or from, the second you wake up to kind of when the show airs, depending on what's on it. There was a bit we did the other day that was we were still editing until, the very last minute when we had to send it in just so we could get on the show. And I'm in LA also, so it's a 6 o'clock in the morning situation, which is really what I planned for when I decided to go into comedy. So it's, yeah, I mean, I'm actually amazed because I feel like I come in the morning and we have this creative meeting and everyone's I watched this documentary and I watched 6 episodes of this, and I'm when? Jimmy's I played this video game. I'm how? When did you do that? I'm convinced they have more time than exists. is what I think.
Gerard, what do you watch to get you excited and get you creative?
This is going to sound like a joke, but it's for real. House Hunters and Dateline repeats.
Dateline.
It's pretty much all I watch. I'm very much like Becky. Like, you know, I work in comedy and I do it, but I don't necessarily want to watch it all the time.
What about you, Jeremy?
Reality TV, Love is Blind, things like that.
Ooh, so good.
The best.
Candy. Jeremy likes candy.
Give them all the awards. Love is Blind. It's so good. Yeah, I watch a lot of that. I would say during the week when we're in show mode, I tend to watch unscripted, and then on the weekends, I will watch as much as I can of scripted stuff. And I still like sitcoms, so I pretty up to date on a lot of them. But that's like weekend stuff.
So let's talk about current events, because we're very excited at Variety that you picked up a big scoop that Variety had, which was Nick Cage has been cast as Tiger King. And there was Jimmy doing Tiger King. Let's go to the clip, Wizard.
So here, for the first time ever, is footage of Nicolas Cage as Tiger King. Hello, my name's Joe Exotic, and welcome to the GW Zoo. Ha ha! My pets are the same as your pets, except mine have 3-inch teeth and weigh 400 pounds. Does any grandma or child want to take a picture with this baby tiger? Carol Baskin! Carol Baskin, have you ever met a guy quite as amazing as me, Joe Exotic?
So what we have to talk about first, it's hilarious. Second of all, who's bringing him the mullet wig, the mustache, and the animal print shirt? And how does that work? Or does he happen to have all of that stuff at home?
That was shipped out to him a few weeks ago. We were mulling the idea of doing some sort of Tiger King sketch as with Jimmy as Joe Exotic, but that didn't happen. But luckily, I think, Jeremy, was it your idea to do this?
Yeah.
You sort of threw it out
Yeah,
there.
thanks a lot, Jeremy.
Yeah.
But you're forgetting, Gerard. You're forgetting how awesome our crew is, because we had actually decided, all right, we're probably not going to do a Tiger King bit, and sent all the costumes back to back to home base. Then this came up, and miraculously, it all like ended up at Jimmy's like 12 hours later. Our crew is really amazing at turning that stuff around. All that
It was
stuff.
a day of peace too.
Yeah.
Well, and
much.
this is a perfect example of what I was sort of saying before. Like, Jeremy had the idea the night before, at which point we should have all just been like, no. But instead, and it was like, okay, great. So first we need to write it. So we got 2 of our writers who are actually also in LA right now to do that in the evening. And in the morning, it was just like, okay, we have to divide up all these shots, and someone's got to, hold a prompter, and Nancy's got to shoot it, and he's going to change clothes, and he's going to change, and Jimmy's sort of like, I'm going to shoot this, and then I'm going to have a meeting about monologue jokes, and then I'm going to go do an interview with whoever, and then I'm going to come back and put this wig on. So, we'll have meetings where he'll be like, yeah, I just talked to Cuomo. It was great. Anyway, what's next? So things are happening at the same time, which is pretty, as a sort of like one foot in the door, still kind of outsider, pretty damn impressive, I gotta say. But that was exactly what I was talking about before, where it was just like last minute, get it done. And then someone's brilliant idea was like, oh, we'll also put a music video in it. So like we were editing and we had to record sound. We had to make a song. Jimmy had to sing the song. The music video, the sky had to be thundering and lightning. So it was a lot, but it happened that day, all of it.
And then Becky was editing that up until like 10:30, or really like an hour before you guys saw it, which was
well, yeah. Jimmy was like, can you go through all the footage and choose the takes. So it was like that day I was an editor, you know, and the day before I was dealing with talent and teaching Mila Kunis and Ashton Kutcher how to play this game, and the day before that I was the head of a writer's room. So it's a lot of different kinds of stuff, which makes it fun. You know, it certainly doesn't drag, that's for sure.
Out in the audience, they have a bunch of questions, and one of them is, how is the editing process working right now?
Slack. That's what's making it possible. Gerard, you want to talk about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, the editors are, you know, everyone's in a different room now, but on Slack, it's kind of made things, which we just sort of transitioned over recently on the show. It's sort of made the communication pretty fluid that way. So once the raw, basically, you know, we send scripts out to Jimmy and then we wait like 3 hours. We don't really know what's going to come back until we see it. And then it's just a matter of getting through it all, and we just give notes over Slack, really. And it's, you know, it's as efficient as it possibly could be. It's not as good as being in a room with an editor over their shoulder, but it hasn't been that, you know, that challenging.
Yeah, I mean,
Any bloopers?
You give notes, they send another cut, you give notes. It's
Any bloopers end up on air at the at-home edition just because of this kind of crazy editing process?
I can't think of one.
He never messes up. That's the thing.
Another question is,
it's a good idea though.
A lot of eyes on it, you know.
We should do that.
We're still doing our job.
Paying attention.
Yeah.
Another question is, how did you decide to get Jimmy's kids on the show? Was that Jimmy's idea, Nancy's idea? Did you have to?
That came out of the writer's room. That was my idea. They're not even his kids. We cast them. I wrote them as brunettes, but that was all we could get.
They're both 30. They're just good.
Yeah, it's like everything else. It sort of just happened organically. You know, Jimmy was, when we first started doing these, they were only like 10 minutes a night. I think the first one might have been on St. Patrick's Day or something, and it was very Wild West, run and gun. We didn't know what it was. We've since sort of built our machine back up a little bit in terms of production, but in the very beginning, it was just run and gun, and whatever happens, happens. Let's see. And his kids are just a part of that. They were just sort of, he's there at home and they're running around and they don't care if, you know, Nancy's recording something for the show. They do not care.
Right. I put that in the category of just leaning into the sort of chaos of the moment, because like we'll be having meetings with Jimmy over Zoom, going over jokes or bits, and kids will run through and sort of take over for a second. So in a sense, it's sort of unavoidable. And then we lean into it because it's really fun to watch, you know?
That's also a thing I liked about the show too, is like, we're not trying to pretend that what's happening isn't happening. You know, I think there's something nice and approachable to the show of just like, we're not trying to pretend we're in a studio and make it look like we're in a studio, because we can't. And I think it's working for Jimmy, and it's allowing for really fun accidents to become things we then do on purpose.
It's been nice to see him flex another. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, this is about you. Go ahead.
I was just going to quickly say it's been nice to see him, you know, use another, just, you know, it's not singing or dancing or all that stuff. He's just being himself, like a bit like Ask the Fallons, where it's literally he and his wife just asking questions and there's no comedy pretense there. It's just them. And I think it's been nice for people to see that side too, a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
And what's your advice for a recent college grad who wants your job?
Whose job?
All your jobs. Someone who wants to be a late night writer?
Man.
I mean, I would say, this may sound obvious, but writing as much as possible. I think a lot of writers who are writing on shows would look back on the packets or samples that they sent in to get those jobs and be horrified. You get better over time. So like the more you write, the better you get. although it has evolved a lot since the three of us sort of got into it, because we've hired writers on the show that were hilarious on Twitter and then became monologue writers, or made like really funny videos on YouTube. So now more than ever, there isn't one prescribed path to get those jobs. But it always does boil down to generating funny stuff in whatever venue that exists in.
Yeah, I guess I hesitated to answer for that same reason of just like, it is so different now than it was when I started, and like all the machinery is totally different, and to like get yourself out there and get yourself noticed. People have opportunities now that literally didn't exist to put their material out there and get seen. And it's that's why I mean, whenever someone has asked me, it's like, what should I do? I'm like, I'm like a dinosaur now, and I'm not a dinosaur.
Oh, you're young.
But like, thank you, Jeremy.
You bet.
But I didn't have, I wasn't, when I was 20, there wasn't, or 15, certainly there wasn't YouTube. I remember like gathering around my friend Dave's computer on a dial-in modem to watch that first Spirit of Christmas video, and it took like an hour. So it's just really different, and the ways that you can get noticed are really different. But my biggest piece of advice would be do it because you love it. The paycheck is for the, sweat and tears part of it, not the actual writing part of it. The paycheck is for the, like, I have to do it when I don't feel like doing it. I have to do it at midnight. I have to do it when someone else thinks something's funny that I don't. So do it because you really love doing it. Because there's a lot of parts of it that are necessary that are not what you love doing. And ideally you'll end up getting to do it, and so you want to enjoy doing it. I think there's a lot of people who, like they say on our favorite reality shows, are in it for the wrong reasons. And if you really do love doing it, then the part that Jeremy's talking about won't be a chore, which is to just make a lot, write a lot, create a lot, enjoy it, and don't worry that much about where it's gonna land you, because you'll miss a lot of opportunities and fun things along the way.
Obviously, Jimmy is a funny man on his own, but what was it like maybe the first time, or how do you tell Jimmy the idea that he's come up with? You're like, that's actually not funny.
Yeah, how do we do that?
This utter silence. No, Jimmy, he understands.
Yeah.
Not everything he says is gold. He's well aware of that, and we make him aware of that for sure. It's actually funny.
What are
things
things
that was really bad, I guess.
What are things that happen in the writer's room that people probably don't expect? They don't realize it.
Anything
Things that happen in the
below
writer's room
here
that people don't know. Ooh.
I mean, I only know about the writer's room that I've been running for a month, and I am very big on like if you have half an idea, that's fine. And there's many other people here who can be like, oh, I know what to do with that. And then some writers are like, I have an idea and I just want to take a pass at it. Great. I have an idea, but I need some help. Fine. I don't know. Are we talking about like
It's juicy
fights?
gossip.
What are we talking about?
It's a very, I don't know if this
fist
is your
fights?
question, but it is a very, the writer's room on this show in particular is like a very yes and supportive, sort of positive vibe. It is not like a sort of cutthroat whose idea is going to get picked. It's just not the feel of the show. People build on each other's stuff. Genuinely, I could say it's like with 100% truth. the writers on the show are like happy for each other when bits succeed, and that is certainly not the case everywhere. But it is a very cool vibe that is in the writers' room.
And I
It's also the I was gonna say, it's also like the tone that Jimmy sets too, right? So everybody sort of follows his lead in that way. And it's a lot of hours. You know, the people that don't really work within those parameters usually don't last.
And then my last question, who do you want on the show and you want to write a skit for them with Jimmy that hasn't been on the show yet? Could be
Well, I can say
anyone.
Jimmy himself. Jimmy himself often wants to do something with the Pope. Or,
that's what I was going to say.
Those are his two big gets.
That's the big fish. So if anybody has an in or his number.
Yeah, if anybody knows the Pope.
You guys didn't tell me. He owes me big.
Are you kidding me?
No.
Yeah.
Do you have the Pope skit already formulated?
Yeah, lip sync.
Do lip sync battle.
Perfect butthole.
Yeah.
It's in a glass box in the studio. I don't know the answer to that because I don't know who has, like it's years and years and years of institutional knowledge I don't have. So
I think, Rebecca, when you come to the first in studio writer's room, I think you need to tell them you booked the Pope.
That is going to be that is now my white whale.
Well, thank you, everybody. I hope everyone enjoyed this. This was fun. It's different.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Wild.
Really cool.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for
you
enduring us for an hour. I appreciate it.
Take care. Stay safe.